Hi, I'm Pete, and welcome to Just a Few Acres Farm. In this episode of the Farmall 856 restoration, the big thing is going to put the fuel tank on, fuel tank frame, starter, torque amplifier, adjust the torque amplifier linkages. Let's do the fun stuff first, stuff that'll make the biggest difference in the appearance of the tractor. Oh, this is a big starter, much bigger than the older tractors. I didn't do anything to this except paint it. Tractor cranked over great, and the solenoid on it looked like it had been replaced fairly recently. Then the spacer block goes on. This is one hunk of metal. Fortunately, it's got a T marked on it. It's got a little relief here that makes it side specific. This cage thing is a support assembly for the fuel tank, bolts on down here. It faces, let's see, this way on the tractor. And it's got all kinds of connections and things for sheet metal and piping, and it's got a lot going on. We're going to flip it over here. I want to put this on before it goes on the tractor. This is the lower heat shield that goes under the fuel tank. Looks like this thing got torqued sometime in the past. It was missing a bunch of bolts. These mounting bolts go through that cast block that I put on first. Secure both at once. But before I tighten those up, we got bolts here too that we got to align. I didn't have to do a lot to this fuel tank. It was in good shape inside, different from a lot of the gasoline tanks that I've worked with before. I put a new fuel level sender on it here, which provides the current to the gauge to tell you what level of fuel's in the tank. You'll notice that this is, if you're familiar with 856s, this is not a regular 856 tank. Regular 856 tank is 42 gallons, and it doesn't have this structure around it here. It has brackets on directly on the tank, and it bolts to the frame. This is an 856 custom tank, which is smaller. It's 33 gallons. I have read that it's the same as a 756 tank, but I'm not positive about that. Here's a set of new pads that the fuel tank sits on. They're the same as the radiator and fuel tank pads on the old Letter Series tractors. I guess I'll lay them on first. I'd say you're kind of a pain. Yep. You're going to make it onto my list. After all, this is an 856 custom tractor. The only thing left of it from the custom line is it's got a single stage air cleaner and a smaller fuel tank. There's three fittings on the bottom of this tank. The first one is diesel supply coming out of the tank to the injection pump. There's a valve on the back of that, and I fixed it so it actually does work. You can close it now. When you change fuel filters, you can shut off the fuel. This return line coming back from the injection pump sends any unused diesel back to the tank. And the third one way over here with a valve on it is a drain fitting. And originally there was a line that went down to just underneath the tractor so that if you wanted to drain the tank, you could open the valve and drain the fuel. First, the return line, because it runs in back. I believe it runs in this clip here. Then the supply line here. Incidentally, this clip back here is a normal wiring clip, but I'm going to get a piece of thin hose and wrap it around this pipe and then wrap the clip around it so it's protected. This goes right on here. These are all the pieces of the torque amplifier linkage where it mounts on the multiple control valve. Sometimes I realize that I'm speaking all Greek to somebody who doesn't know these tractors, but that's what it is. This pin goes in here for safekeeping. This guy goes in here with a pin. And finally, this goes in here. In order to put this on, I have to take out some bolts that I temporaried on the MCV because it mounts right on here. We got one pin that goes into the torque amplifier plunger here. And then we got this that works on the clutch dump valve there. We got a couple bolts. And these are also temporaries because the hydraulic clutch mounts back this way on these two bolts as well. And that's why this bolt has a spacer on it, because the clutch is going on later. This pin goes on here. This clevis here will act on the clutch shaft. It's got a little ear on it to pull the dump valve out, which the dump valve dumps pressure to the torque amplifier so that when the clutch is in, the gears are free to roll a little bit so you can mesh the gear back in when you shift gears. Next there's of course the lever that goes on here and a linkage that comes down and hooks up to the MCV. Here's the mounting bracket for the torque amplifier lever. And then the shaft that the lever goes on goes in here. I greased it some. And then on the back side you can see there's a pin here that stops the lever in this direction, and then there's a bolt here which is adjustable to stop it in the other direction so you get this travel. And then this is just about impossible for you to see, I guess, but this is a spring. This functions over center on spring tension to snap the lever to one side or the other. And I've got to get it mounted in here. No, not that way. What about this way? Oh, that'll work. Then we can draw it over center and snap it back in. Put the lever on to pull on it. So we draw it back to the stop here, and then hopefully we can pull it in. Yep, that worked. Now the linkages that come down from this handle, because it's got to come and then a 90 degree and then over to here. First this one. That one comes down to this swivel, direction changer, whatever you want to call it. I got to take this off. And it has yet another shoulder bolt on it. This one's greasable. I'll have to touch this up with a brush. This is quite a complicated assembly through here. And it needs adjustment. When the torque amplifier is ahead and the plunger's down like this, we want it to seat pretty darn close to that snap ring that's on there, and it doesn't right now. So to adjust it, I need to take this stop bolt here and thread it in a little bit. I took it out for cleaning and didn't get it back in quite the right spot, I think. The other thing I can do is pull this linkage apart. Pull that back forward. Get this till the plunger is almost all the way down. There's where we want to be with the snap ring right about on the MCV. This applies to adjusting an MCV on a tractor that's not being restored as well. Now all I have left are a ton of cotter pins to take care of and some touch-up painting. That's it for batch 4 of parts, which I've done over the last 2 videos because there was a lot of fussy linkages and adjustment and little stuff. The last part of this video I wanted to talk about is that this is a custom 856. This is a badge that goes on the front sides here and it says custom 856. What's the difference between a custom and a regular 856? International Harvester produced the 756 custom and the 856 custom as less optioned versions of the regular 856 and 756. And that was to compete with another manufacturer who was doing the same thing, John Deere, who had come out with, in the 856's case, the 4000 as a stripped down version of the 4020. And so they were trying to match prices in the marketplace or maybe undercut each other a little bit by doing that. Now, the differences between the 856 custom and a regular 856, it's kind of little stuff. 856 custom had a single hydraulic remote, fast hitch, which is International's 2-point instead of a 3-point hitch. Smaller fuel tank, as I said. A single headlight on each fender instead of the dual headlights that are standard. A single element air filter instead of the dual element air filter that's standard. 34-inch rear tires in lieu of 38-inch rear tires. Battery hold down angles on the batteries on each side instead of full covers. No rear work light and 8, possibly, I'm not positive about this, 8-hole centers on the back, wheel centers on the back instead of the standard 12-hole wheel centers. The 8-hole centers have less metal in them. They were a lighter duty center, so they could save money on that. Now, you can define the 856 custom as that, but what was happening, I think quite a bit, is some of those options were getting added back on either by the dealer or down the road by successive owners. Take this 856 custom. It's got 2 hydraulic remotes on the back. It's got a 3-point hitch. It's got dual headlights on the fenders. It's got a lot of the stuff that was taken out added back in, and it's important to remember that the dealers could option out a tractor that way at the dealership. So if a customer came in and all they had was an 856 custom on the lot, the customer could say, well, I want an extra hydraulic remote or this size tires or whatever, and the dealer could easily option that for them, put it on right there at the dealer. So a lot of customs are around that aren't necessarily missing all of these features. The 856 was made between 1967 and 1971, and the total 856 numbers made were someplace in the neighborhood of 23,200. For the 856 custom, it's a very small number, 3,676, give or take 1 or 2, were made between 67 and 71. So there's not a lot of these around. And they did it, as I mentioned, to compete with the John Deere 4000, which was a stripped down version of the 4020. And I started doing a little research on what John Deere did to produce the 4000, and it was a lot of similar stuff, you know, just removing options and kind of stripping down the tractor a bit. But the big thing that they did that International Harvester didn't do was they lightened the gear train a whole lot on the 4000. In fact, the tractor was about 1,000 pounds lighter. This has got the same powertrain in it as a regular 856. I have heard that they lightened the powertrain by putting a 3020 rear end into it, back from, you know, the bell housing that it's all a 30-20 gear and final drive transmission. I'm not positive that's the case, but 1,000 pounds is a lot of weight, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. So you had a 40-20 front end or engine mounted to a 30-20 back end. I think that probably gave them a real advantage in the marketplace, because when you take weight off the tractor, that's money, that's metal, that's money. So it's interesting to investigate these little pieces of history to kind of get into what you're working with. Next video, I'll be putting on the air cleaner, the dash. I'm going to start working on the wiring. I've got the oil cooler system to put in, so we'll keep marching along. I'm headed toward getting the wheels on here, probably 2 batches down the line. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.